Hey guys, what's up? It's Ripe again. In today's video, an insane Karen goes crazy on an airplane. She demands that the pilot lets her 5-year-old kid fly the airplane. When he refuses, she tries to break into the cockpit, and from there on, things get violent and dangerous. Here is what happened. Let's dive right into the story. The title story starts like this. So I am from a small West African country called Burkina Faso. Airplane travel is becoming more and more common nowadays, but back when this story happened, it was still something special. As a pilot, there are a ton of Karens to deal with, but they are almost always harmless. They wanna do things like change their seat or get a random upgrade to first class. Things are that entitled and annoying, but not inherently dangerous. Only once in my career as a pilot have I dealt with a Karen that was actually crazy, and that was the one that tried to hijack our plane and give the controls over to her 5-year-old kid. I need to note that this took place pre-9/11, so regulations were very different, and depending on the flight and company and other things, the rules were very different back then. I flew planes that were smaller than standard commercial ones and catered to a bit of a fancier clientele. It was also super common at the time before the flight took off to allow children to meet the pilots and even see the inside of a cockpit. I was doing a pretty standard flight with my co-pilot, and it was only a 3-hour trip, so we were not tired or worn out. We were actually having a great day, so of course that was the flight that we had a psycho Karen on board. I like to know about potential situations before they happen, so if there is a very bad passenger, I ask that my flight attendant let me know. About an hour into the flight, she alerts me that there's a Karen demanding for her and her son to get into the cockpit. Once the flight is going, nobody is coming into the cockpit because of how risky it is. Hijacking did exist back then, and the last thing we wanted was to make a detour for some criminal. I told the flight attendant to tell her that I said nobody is getting in, and that was final. However, not 10 minutes later, I hear a banging on the door, and I know that it is not my flight attendant because mainly she would not yell like that. No, it's the psycho Karen herself trying to speak to me through the damn door. I could not get everything she was saying, but I was getting the general idea. She was talking about how she paid so much money, and this was her kid's first flight, and she wanted it to be special. Then some stuff I didn't understand, and then back to telling us to let her in. My co-pilot offered to talk to her and make her go back to her seat. He went and was going to stand at the door and tell her no, but when he got there, the door was being opened by Karen herself on the other end. Karen, how dare you not open the door for me and my son? Co-pilot, ma'am, you cannot be in here. Return to your seat now and leave the cockpit door closed. Karen, I'm coming in and you're not gonna stop me. I want my son to fly a plane and you're going to be a good little boy and let him. I could not believe how we were being spoken to. While they were having this conversation, I quickly followed protocol for an unauthorized person in the cockpit. A signal was sent out and we were preparing for an emergency landing at the next safe landing spot where police and air marshals would be waiting. I was just hoping that he could get her to sit down in the meantime and I could land without problems. That did not happen though, because I heard a thud and turned to see my co-pilot unconscious on the ground. I was kind of panicking at this point as she walked closer to me. I was the only one now who could fly the plane, and if she tried to knock me out too, we could all crash. She told me that I better move out of the way and let her son fly, or I was gonna be the next one on the ground. She somehow ended up with a metal tray that the flight attendant uses on her car to give out drinks and snacks. I also would like to note that her son was not with her, and as I found out later, he was in his seat sleeping through this whole thing. I told her that her son could not fly the plane and made a mistake in saying that I contacted the authorities and she was gonna be arrested. She was ready to attack me as well, but I guess all the shouting got the attention of other passengers. And then this one guy walked in, took the tray from her hands and smacked her in the head with it. This guy was huge and, as it turns out, played amateur football, which explained his size. He said he was worried what she would do and did what he had to do. The guy was worried that I was gonna have him arrested too, because he knocked her out and technically entered the cockpit too. I assured him that it was fine and even asked him to help me restrain her with emergency cuffs until we landed. He did exactly that, and soon I was back in the cockpit with the door closed. We landed about 20 minutes later and the plane got swarmed with officers. The Karen was transferred into other handcuffs and taken off the plane. He must have not hit her very hard because she woke up as she was getting arrested and started to resist them, yelling that she paid for the flight and that meant she could go anywhere in the plane she wanted. She was arrested, obviously, and went to jail under the charges of an attempted hijacking and assault. Her son was woken up and taken off the airplane as well because he didn't have anybody else traveling with him. Looking back, I feel really bad for this kid because he was 5 and probably excited for his first flight. I can just hope that him being asleep meant he was not scarred for life from planes. My co-pilot got checked out and was deemed okay to fly. Some passengers were a little annoyed about the delay, but all of them understood why and it didn't cause any type of fuss. As for the missing flight attendant, Karen somehow managed to push her into the bathroom and barricade it shut. She did not want to continue the flight, while of course the company understood and got her accommodations to stay where we landed for a couple of days to recover. I can only imagine now how things would have played out in this type of scenario. The updates with both security and also technology would have made her actions nearly impossible today. The door would not be able to get pried open as easily as she did, and emergency response would have been faster. Heck, with the way she acts, there was a chance that she would have gotten turned away at the airport by bringing something she could not have or throwing a huge Karen fit. Times really have changed and this story really shows that. Also, it shows that some people are totally out of their mind and think that their 5-year-old can and should control an airplane that is 20,000 feet in the air. And yeah, Ripe Stars, I would say it's sort of a double-edged sword. On the one hand, it's nice to know that security has improved this much, but of course we all despise the controls at the airport. You know, for me personally, when I am traveling with my microphone, pretty much no matter how I hide it or put it in my bag, I always get called out by security and they think it's some kind of bomb or something, at least here in Thailand. Anyway, the next one is titled No More Privacy for You. Yesterday, while I was making lunch, I heard a really loud sound, as if the ceiling was falling or a bookshelf had fallen. My husband, 41 male, and daughter, 17 female, were out. The only other person in the house was my son, 16 male. I was pretty sure that he was in his room, which is at the opposite side of the house from the kitchen, so while making my way there, I checked every room and everything seemed in order. I knocked on my son's door and called his name, to no answer. I must have knocked and called 3 times before trying to open the door, which was locked. At this point I was getting really freaked out, thinking that maybe he tipped his wardrobe or bookshelf and it had fallen over him and he was passed out on the floor. I was basically screaming his name and got no answer. I have no idea how I did it. I just threw myself against the door and it broke. Now clearly the door was already weak, I am thinking termites, but yeah, it broke. My son was fine, he was freaked out about the door, but fine. The sound was his TV with the volume at the maximum apparently, and he did not answer me calling because he didn't want me bothering his movie. His words were, "You were screaming like a harpy and it was annoying. I was trying to watch the movie. Fix the door." I said no, I was not gonna fix it, since to fix it I would have to buy a new door and doors are expensive. As soon as his dad got home he would remove the door entirely as it was too broken to just stay there. He got really mad and said it is his right to have a door, he deserves his privacy. I said he had a door and while I was the one that broke it and it was a consequence of his actions, so if he wanted a door he would have to buy it. I know he doesn't have the money for it right now, and until then, no door. He can change in the bathroom. He said F you, and I said he was grounded. So, Reddit, am I the a-hole about the door? My husband is fine with it and says only I know how scared I was, so only I can know the appropriate punishment. I am now terrified that if anything happens where we really need to reach my son, we won't be able to. But I've calmed down since and I'm wondering if maybe I am really the a-hole. And yeah, Ripe Stars, let me know in the comments what you think about this. Do you think that OP was the a-hole in this situation or not? And a user in the comments said, I usually say parents are always a-holes for taking away doors, but this? Absolutely not the a-hole. However, you and your husband need to sit down and think about how to fix your son's behavior ASAP because he is way out of line. Comment number 2, not the a-hole. If even half of this is accurate and true, your son is incredibly disrespectful. If not having a door is a punishment he doesn't like, no door for him then. If it were me, he also would not have a TV, phone, tablet, laptop, gaming system, etc. and saying F you to a parent is almost always inexcusable. Top that with his nonchalant behavior about not answering you, and then his ref fix the door, game over. And the next one is titled Steal My Tips, I Rock Your World. Posted by user Pizza Nerd on r/ripe stories, which is our own subreddit. A bit of backstory, I worked in a high-end pizza restaurant as a busboy and a server, not a waiter. This restaurant also had kitchen workers making pizzas, delivery drivers who did prep, as well as making deliveries, and bar girls who took your order when you came in. They served you drinks at the bar that you placed your order at before you went to sit down at your seats. At the bar, there are 2 big tip jars that were usually jam-packed on busy nights. Now, you would think the money in that jar would go to everyone, right? But wrong. Company policy back then was that half the money in the tip jars went to the main bar girl for that shift, while the other half went to the main kitchen worker for the shift. Not a penny went to any of the servers. This meant that the closing bar and kitchen people would get an extra $40 or $50 in tips on top of their actual paycheck. Anytime servers got tips was when customers left it on the table, but of course that meant any of the servers could snatch it up if they buzzed the table. I could write some crazy stories about that one day, and customers leaving a tip at the restaurant was incredibly rare. Anywho, let's meet the cast. Me, the overlord of pizza, nice customer NC, bar girl BG, good manager GM, and jerk boss JB, who will show up later. So petty revenge start. One weekend I was scheduled to work the opening server shift for Saturday and Sunday, which I did not mind. Good manager was substituting as jerk boss for the weekend while jerk boss was away for a family vacation. The restaurant was fairly busy Saturday with about a quarter of the tables taken, including a nice family of 4 that included nice customer sitting in the back of the restaurant. I put on my best customer service skills and served all tables as best as I can. As the people trickle out, nice customer and her family was leaving, they wanted to give me a tip but at the time could not find me. I was taking a phone order at the time, but as I walked from the back room that was beside the bar, nice customer found me by accident. Me, have a great day ma'am. NC, thank you, same with you. I could not find you to give you a tip, so I gave it to the nice lady, points at bar girl, at the bar to give it to you. I internally groaned as I watched the nice customer walk out the door. Bar girl did not have the typical Karen haircut, but she had the "I'm better than you and I know it" attitude. After nice customer walks out the door, I go straight to bar girl, all the while good manager is standing nearby drinking water beside her. Me, excuse me BG, could I get that tip NC gave you? BG, oh that. I will count you out later. Me, I would really like it now. Tips for servers are rare. BG, later. Before I can get another word in, the phone rings and she instantly answers it. First time I've actually seen her take one to avoid talking to me. I look past her and see GM lightly jerk his head as if to say, go buzz NC's table. I groan and proceed to get back to work. But all that day and into the dinner shift I approach BG about the tips I was owed. She would say every time that she would count me out later, but every time I asked her and she responded the same way, I made it a point that GM was standing well within earshot. I forgot how many times I asked her for my money, but it was at least 6 times and she would always give the same response. I was let off for the evening and asked one last time before walking out the door. BG told me that she was very busy with customers. I let it slide and leave for the night. The next day I am working the same shift, same manager and same bar girl. Right after clocking in and minutes before customers come into the restaurant, I walk up to the empty bar with BG and GM behind it. BG is on her cell phone texting while GM is standing nearby writing inventory in a binder when the following occurs. Me, hey BG, can I get my tips now? BG, what tips? Me, the tips from last night. Remember that NC gave you money to give me because she couldn't find me? BG, oh, you didn't make any. Sneering before turning back to her phone. Me, last night a customer gave you money that was meant for me and I would like it. Holding my hand out beside her phone. BG, not looking up from her phone, you didn't get any. At this point GM closes the prep folder he's been writing and approaches. Excuse me, what's going on? BG, he thinks I took his tips from yesterday. Me, I served a woman last night and she wanted to give me a tip but couldn't find me, so she gave the tip to her. As I point to BG, GM, I know all last night he was asking for his tips and you said that you would count him out later. BG, he didn't get any tips. GM, was it the lady in the back room? Me, yeah. I nod my head as I point to the table at the back of the restaurant. She was sitting there with her family. GM, well, I know for a fact that she asked to give a tip to her server but couldn't find him, so why didn't get OP his tips? BG, he didn't get those tips because he does not deserve them. GM, why is that? BG, he didn't deserve them. I do. He's a server, I'm a bar girl. I am pretty, damn it. Yes, she actually said that. GM, OP, go wash dishes or something. BG, let's go into the office. I walk into the dish area and smirk from ear to ear, thinking this was the end of it, but how wrong I was. Pro revenge start. A few days later, JB had come back from his vacation and finds out what happened over the weekend. The man was notorious for writing get out of jail free cards to people if it was for the good of the company. This has led to some employees thinking since they were essential employees they could get away with stuff they had certainly been written up or fired for if it happened under a competent manager. The first day Jerk Boss and I worked together, he asked me to step into the office before I can begin my shift for the dinner shift. Jerk Boss, what happened last weekend? I go into detail how I served NC, how they left the tip to BG for me because they couldn't find me, and how I asked multiple times for the tips I was owed and never got it, and how I confronted her when GB cut me off. JB, I'm afraid I cannot excuse what you did. Me, what I did? What about what she did? You gonna excuse her for theft? JB, she did nothing wrong. Half the tips go to her while the other half went to the kitchen worker. You know the rules, OP. Me, yes, I do know the rules. The rules state half the contents of the tip jars go to the main shift's bar girl and the other half go to the main shift's kitchen worker. But this customer handed the tip to bar girl and told her the tip was for me. And then bar girl kept it for herself. JB, either way, I'm not punishing BG and that's final. Now go back to work or I will write you up. I leave the office only to be met with the smug grin of BG standing behind the counter. I walk into the dish area where all the other servers were standing there loitering around. They all knew from how I was pestering BG on Saturday that I was supposed to get the tips, and all of them were delighted when they heard GM had pulled BG into the office to lecture her. However, punishment for all employees at our restaurant was decided and ultimately handed out by JB. Me, I need to make a phone call. Cover me for a few minutes. All the servers nodded as they all guessed what I was about to do. I left the restaurant and went behind the dumpster out back and called GM. I told him he refused to punish BG and threatened to write me up. GM promised to check into everything. The fallout was great. The owner of the franchise got involved and reviewed everything. While I did not get my tip, the manager now had to give the main server for the shift and the closing dishwasher a portion of the tip jar. It irritated Bar Girl so much that she was not making as much money anymore that she left the company about 3 months later, but of course not without being a royally sized Karen every night I worked with her. The surprising thing is where she went to work next. A bank, no joke, after that jerk boss severely cut my hours so that a new server would get double the days and hours I got, and he rarely ever scheduled me to close. Also, when the minimum wage went up, he did not think I deserved a raise despite working for the company for so long. I continued to work there despite this since I had difficulty finding another employment, which is difficult since I have some bad medical problems. Eventually, Jerk Boss was offered a job at an auto shop which he was raving had better pay, shorter hours and was closer to home. Jerk Boss left the company and the new manager who took over is way nicer. All the toxic people who thought they were essential employees and benefited from the countless get-out-of-jail-free cards were upset that they couldn't get away with the bullpoop they had fun doing when Jerk Boss was a manager. They all trickled out of the company one by one and were all replaced by employees who were not only more polite but better at the job they were doing. Now you're all thinking, this must be where the story ends, right? Well, there's one last cherry on top. Just before the pandemic entered our lives, the auto place Jerk Boss suddenly realized the auto shop was not as great as it was promised and soon began asking good manager if he could come back. I laughed when I heard this, since after Jerk Boss left, the pizzeria is booming with profit and it is now a much nicer place to work. And I get the tips every time I close. And yeah, Ripe Stars, I am very happy for this positive ending for OP. I know how bad it can be to work in a toxic work environment, but it's really nice to hear that things can change for the better. And with this, we have reached the end of the video. However, I want to ask you for a favor. If you have watched until here, please check out my new channel called The Readers, where I and other voice actors post daily stories that you will very much enjoy. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you again tomorrow.